Do I have everybody's follow-up assignment to the presentation? I got everybody's? Good. Okay, let's talk. What made terminating 2 people from your group difficult? It doesn't feel good. What made that a tough decision? Yeah. Thank you for having the courage to say that. So everybody saw what happened in Amazon this week, right? 30,000 people laid off. Crazy. I had many former students call me. They all got laid off. Didn't know it was coming. They got an email Tuesday morning. And what was crappy is after they open the email, they get another email that says that everything is terminated at this point. So when they open the email, it's terminated their insurance, their employment, everything. They got a confirmation email. It's brutal, right? So the exercise of putting 6 to 7 people in a group makes it unmanageable, right, from a group standpoint. So remember when we did the productivity pyramid, and I said these are seekers, solvers, right? So it's interesting. When you put people, you can hire people on the happy, clean profile. They should all be some sort of rock star, right? But the problem is when you put 7 people together, there's not enough work to go around, right? How does everybody participate in that group? It's difficult. So what you find in an organization, if I have too many people, they will sift. I want you to think about yourself in that group of 6 or 7 people. You may be normally a person that participates, but what happens when there's too many people? You may let the alpha personalities take over. And that's how you end up on a list that gets terminated. Yeah, that's reality. You have to figure out how you participate. If your boss assigns you to a group of 7, immediately ask, do we need 7 people in this project? The optimum grouping is about 3. Past 3, politics enters every group. And you allow people to falter. Because they'll sift easily to this in a work environment. That's a problem. Does anybody remember how many people Elon Musk terminated when he bought Twitter? Everybody thought he was nuts. He could have been nuts, don't get me wrong. Do you remember how many people he terminated? Shortly after taking it over? Like he just, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's like 70% of the workforce he terminated. Did it hurt Twitter? Did it change it? Feels ugly on the front end, but has anybody missed a tweet? I don't know. There is some bloating, and then you add AI to it. What everybody thinks it's going to do, still unproven. But there's actually a lot of bloat in companies. And companies, especially big companies, tend to increase headcount when things are good. So it's always this cycle. That's why I say the most common firing you're going to encounter in the real world is the RIF. It is painful. It's not fun. I've done 9 of them, hated every one of them. Because I felt good about everybody that I worked with. I hired a great team, but I no longer had a business case. And it's ugly to go to people. So when you had to write down the people you fired, what were the typical things that caused you to terminate the 2 people? Anybody? Anthony, why did you fire the 2 people?
Participation.
Okay, like during the presentation or the build-up?
Mainly the build-up.
Okay, thank you. What else? Who else? Somebody started to say. Why else did you terminate people? Why else did you terminate?
That was participation during the presentation.
Okay. Does it seem like something that they should get fired over?
No.
If you had it to do over again, would you spend more time with each person so that you understood them? I would encourage you to do that. And it makes it even tougher if we have to fire somebody. But you want points of differentiation when you go to fire somebody. When you do a merit review, you typically do it annually. When you do that merit review, the trap is, it'll say, where could this employee use improvement? Where does most people's minds go to when you say, tell me how so-and-so could improve? What do they look for? What do you look for when somebody says, what could you improve upon? Max, what do you look for when you say, what can you improve upon?
Just like be more accountable.
Okay. But is it something typically that you would say, this is a huge personality flaw? Right, the fact that I got to search for it tells me I'm nitpicking, right? Because reality is, if they're a problem employee, you should have handled it before merit review time. Typically what shows up, and you're going to experience this, you have a boss that writes a merit review, they've gone all year, let's assume you're doing great work, they're telling you you're doing great work, and then it comes time for the merit review, and they say, well, I got to come up with something on Max. Let's see, he was late getting me that assignment in October, and that goes in your merit review. One data point, because they got to come up with something. When you're doing this with your boss and they go there, confront them. That is not indicative of the 360 days out of the year that I spent with Max, because what that gets interpreted as is Max is late on assignments. He was late on one. Yeah, but it drives back to, because I have to give him something to improve upon. Because it's difficult for the boss to say, during the year, if there's an issue, I handle it. If I've handled it, it's unfair to put it in a merit review. Right? If you remember when Jennifer spoke, she said you do calibration. That is a forced ranking exercise. Most HR departments are going to tell you, we don't do forced rankings. Baloney. Every company does a forced ranking. It's shelved under calibration. Calibration tells me the rank of the people, and HR says, okay, they have to report to finance. Here's who we would keep if we have to reduce headcount. Because when you do calibration, you're also doing budget. So typically the way that goes down is, senior management sits down, the board or senior management says, hey, here's the number, 52 million. And the functional management team says, holy crap, that's a 40% growth rate over last year. How are we going to do it? Well, for me to go from 44 million to 52 million, I'm going to need X more salespeople. I'm going to need sales operations people. I'm going to need a few more assistants. So here's what I need to deliver that, and that's where the fighting is. So what do you think happens mid-year if they say, yeah, go ahead and staff to hit the 52 million? What do you think happens mid-year when you're not hitting your numbers? we don't have the budget to support the headcount. And that's just on a small scale. So companies like Procter & Gamble, when times are good, they add a layer of associate directors. If you're in that role and there's a revenue shortfall, that is the first role that'll get cut, right? Starbucks, for a long time, didn't have assistant managers. And they were lauded for it because they said, well, that's a position, actually a fairly high-paid position that we don't need. We're not working that into our equation. Ironically, now they're testing assistant managers. But when you think about it, what does an assistant manager do? Typically, they're needed 3 or 4 weeks out of the year when the manager's on vacation. Is that a good spend to have an assistant manager during that? You could argue no. Right, I could designate somebody the manager of the moment if I'm on vacation. They become the manager in training. When I get back from vacation, they go back to the regular deal. Yeah, makes sense? So, here's what's interesting. When you ask a team, and this is a good practice, when you take over a team of people, do what's called a 360 review. And that's essentially what you did. You say, give me a one-word descriptor for everybody, force rank, and would give me the percentage that they contribute as a team member to this team. But you don't share it as a team. As a manager, you get it. But it's interesting, everybody knows the top 2 people. There's almost no variable in that, and everybody knows the bottom 2. So if I were to take your papers and lay them out as a group, I would see this cluster. Everybody knows those 2. These are up for grabs. So as a manager, who do I spend my time with? Do I spend my time with the top or the bottom? Who gets my time? The people that read first break all the rules should know this. Who do I spend my time with? Yeah.
To me, it makes sense to spend time at the bottom and look to raise them up.
Okay, so that seems right? First break all the rules, what Marcus Buckingham found is that actually decays your team. The counterintuitive genius of that book is you spend it with your top 2 performers because they'll multiply your team. So the time I spend with them is, hey, I need you to help these people. Now, the assumption here is everybody gets the same training, right? So you start with a company, you go through the training program, the onboarding. They're going to have you sign a document that says you were trained. Do you know why they do that? It's proof and it's compliance that everybody got the same tools. Because I'm going to rate you on what you do with those tools. Right? That's how I can fire you. Because if I don't document that, it makes it very difficult, especially if I get sued. Yeah, so thank you, because you think intuitive is like, hey, I want to help these people, but I can actually add more velocity to my business by working with my star performers. So as a manager, that's what you want to do. So my line is always, if I have these 2 people and I give them forced ranking, and they're happy being here, is usually when you do the forced ranking, you get all this from everybody, you sit down with everybody, and I say, Max, let's go through your forced ranking. And Max rates himself number 1, but the team ranks him 5 or 6. Max has a perception problem. I'm just picking on Max. So the discussion with Max goes, dude, why does the rest of your team, no names mentioned, nobody puts you in the top 2 boxes? Why is that? And why is that a surprise to you? What this gives you as a manager is Max could be really good at managing up. I think he's a superstar. But the team knows. Right now I gotta look at this different. Make sense? Yeah, it's very revealing. That's also super damaging if I tell Max what the team said about it. You don't do that. But I know this is the story. Right now I need to dig into Max deeper. If the team doesn't see him as a leader and I make him a leader, what happens to the team? Yeah, no, nobody likes to be a part of that team. Because everybody respects. If I make a decision, everybody should understand who gets the job. So each person, when I'm sitting with them, I'm like, hey, if I'm talking to 6 or 7, and I think they're 6 and 7, they have to know I think they're 6 and 7. And where I've worked, I always say, hey, if there's a cut, you're a part of it. You need to know that. It's a difficult conversation to have. Here's what I need you to do to get off the bottom. If I'm in sales, it's easy. I need more revenue. Yeah, I'm going to assign you to work with number 1 or number 2 to increase your skill set. If you don't put in the energy, I can't help you. Because I'm going to be working with 1 and 2 to make sure they're good here. Right? Yeah. So when you're talking with your boss, and you're doing a merit review, a good question to ask your boss is, hey, if we had a cutback, am I safe? You want to hear it. You may not want to hear what they say, but they should have the courage to tell you, you know what, if we had a cutback, I've rated you down here, and here's why. If you're in sales, you've never met a quota. And other people have trouble working with you. And guess what? You don't have a really good relationship with any of your clients. Where should you rank? Yeah, because I hired you to build a book of business, to keep current clients happy, and to grow our business. That's what business development is. If you're leaving here with any other viewpoint that you're killing those, we need to have a different discussion. But you need to know you're in this box. And if you're in this box, it doesn't mean, even if I don't have a cutback, they're still at risk. Right? I said last class, if you hire a 7 on a 70 on a happy cleat, they're a problem because the amount of time it takes me to play with them is preventing me from hiring a 9 or a 10, either or not. The 7s are typically the problems. They're lukewarm. So what do I do with 3, 4, and 5? Because they're either going to sift up or down. What do we do with the middle pack? It's management, man. What do I do with them? How do I have the discussion before striking? What do I say?
They're doing good, could be better.
Yeah. You're camping. Today's decision day. What do you want to do? Because if I just leave you, more than likely you're going to go down. Here's the extra thing I need to see from you. Maybe a special project. But we all have to produce revenue. Right? This group will sift. But they sift up or down. I keep my eye on them, but I still spend my time here. The people that are motivated here, they're going to want your time. Give them bits of your time as a manager to see what they do with it. So I have an employee that asked me out to lunch. And typically when somebody asks the boss out for lunch, there's an agenda. This individual asked me out to lunch and talked about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Told me about being a bridesmaid in an upcoming wedding. It was all great. I want to know you as a person. but no business context. Yeah, so what do you say to somebody like that? Now they're early in their career. What do you say to that person? Not a bad person, clueless. But what do you say to them? If you want to help them grow, you typically don't ask the C-level to lunch to talk about entertainment, current events. Let's have a business purpose when you engage. It doesn't have to be all business, but an hour-long lunch and I talk nothing about business is a problem, right? Especially when the company's paying for the lunch, and they're paying for both our time. When they ask you, what is it you want to do, it's okay to say, I don't really know enough about the company yet to understand where I want to go. Where do you think my strengths should be deployed? Well, let's talk about your strengths. What is it? Because I could have a perception gap about what they're capable of doing. That's when I want them to unload. Here's what I'm really good at, okay? Let's test it. So when you have those moments with somebody that's in your chain of command, so to speak, make sure you maximize it. It's okay, you want to be a little personable, but get to the business case, in the business context. Because their time is supposed to be spent growing a business, right? So, these two people, let's say I do my annual calibration and I tell number 6 and 7 that they're on the chopping block. What do I expect to come out of that conversation? It's not fun for them. And the first time you do it as yourself, it's not fun. But what do you expect? So let's say I have this calibration meeting October, November. I have my new number for the next year. And I say, hey, if I had to make a decision today, you would be on the team Jan 1. What do I expect to come out of that? If you're that employee, and I'm saying that to you, what should I hear? Anthony, what should I hear?
Improvement.
Yeah, but what do you say to me? I say, hey, Anthony, you're 6 or 7. Great. Anthony, I love hearing that. Here's the 3 things I need from you. Whatever they are. What do you say?
I'll get to work on it, or is there somebody who can partner up with today?
Yeah, put together an action plan so that I know you know what we talked about. Put together an action plan and say, here's what I'm going to do by when, and here's when I'd like to touch base. You don't want to leave that conversation to chance. If I tell you in October that you're a problem, and I don't hear from you, what do you think I think?
That you're fine with that?
Yeah, or the message didn't get through, or you don't care. Because if somebody tells you you're on the chopping block and you do nothing with it, yeah, I'm putting the hammer down. That should spur you to something. I can tell you from experience when it doesn't, I make those decisions quickly. I should have the action plan in 48 hours. Because I just told 2 people they're on the Titanic. They should be looking for a lifeboat and telling me how they're getting there. Right? It's okay to ask for help. I usually tell them that. Yeah.
Have you ever been in a spot where you're in the bottom 6 or 7? And I feel like if I was the bottom 6 or 7, I'd just go find a different job.
Yeah. So, thank you. So if I don't get it, if I don't get this, I ask to meet with them again and say, where are we at? Because I think today's decision day. Yeah. I'll usually say, let's go out 45 days. And you and I both separate in 45 days. You have to do your day job, but I'll help you. If you have an interview or whatever, but you still need to show up and do your job to the best of your ability. But 45 days out, if you don't have a job, it's not my problem.
So at 45 days, would it be like, you said we're going our separate ways, does that mean I'm firing you?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, or you're quitting.
So it's not like you don't give the 2 weeks, you give them a month normally? Is that
Yeah.
just with big corporations?
Most people don't do this. HR will tell you to fire them.
I was under the impression that they put on an action plan that the company already has for them.
Yeah, action plan, or, PIPs take longer. I hate PIPs. I'd rather have this discussion than put you on a PIP. Because PIPs require a ton of my time, and I've never seen somebody turn a PIP around. So, and typically you get 90 days on a PIP, yeah.
Isn't it better to like do the 45-day plan and try to coach them out to get them to find new jobs, you don't have to pay them when you fire them?
Bingo. And I usually just say, I think you just quit us. Yeah, because if I fire them, there's a chance that I gotta pay unemployment. Yeah,
But they don't have to quit, like, if we're some stores who would fire them.
Yeah. yeah, if I fire them for cause, it's tough. Yeah, so if I do a RIF, they can qualify for unemployment.
So this is a RIF?
Now, this is performance-based. But if I do my calibration in October and the company comes to me in November and says, you gotta get rid of 2 people, they're part of the team. Yeah. Makes sense? It's not fun, but it's people management. So you really need to get to know the people. Don't take a cursory glance at it, because you need to know where they're at. In their development, what's preventing them. Now, what if they have family issues? What if they have a sick child that's preventing them from doing their job? Or a sick spouse, or they're sick? How does that play into the equation? Are you running a business or a social service? You'll deal with this. How do you deal with this? Do I keep somebody because they got a family issue, the business suffers? It's brutal. And some people will play you. They'll pull that card. Right? Because they've had weak managers in the past that have played well with. Yeah. I'm not running social services. I hate it that you're in that situation. Now, if somebody's been a great employee for a number of years, I'm going to play with them longer. I understand it. But they still have to deliver minimum. Sadly, when they stop delivering minimum, I've got to tell them. I know this sucks. I've had to do that. It's painful. Somebody encounters cancer for the first time. It's painful. You let them use their vacation. They can take paid leave or unpaid leave of absence. The team suffers because I need that role. We'll do everything we can, but at some point, it's ugly. Yeah. So, when Jennifer was talking about calibration, they do it in a number of different ways. The most common is what they call a 9-box calibration. The upper right-hand corner of those 9 boxes, it's a 3x3 matrix, are the people that you promote. Everybody else is kind of, you know, they're a role player, they deliver. The bottom left-hand corner is where you don't want to be. We can definitely live without you. The trap that the first time you go through that with human resources, put somebody in the bottom left-hand corner, they're going to say, why haven't you terminated them? Because they're clearly a problem. And that's, I'm not telling you to game the system, but if you say, hey, I'm going to put this person in the bottom left-hand corner, be prepared to terminate them quickly. Because when you turn in your calibration, the organization's going to say, hey, what are you doing? Yeah. So, Amazon, what they just went through, they did calibration in May. Anytime you feel a company do calibration off cycle, you know something's about to happen. There's a reason they did calibration in May versus October. Yeah, so I had former students calling me and saying, hey, you know, it's weird, we did calibration last October, and now we're doing it in May. What do you think? I'm like, you definitely want to have a transparent conversation with your boss, because they're doing this for a reason. Yeah, calibration should happen once a year. If it's not on that 12-month cycle, you want to have a different conversation with your boss. Just say, hey, full transparency, what are we doing? Why are we recalibrating? It's typically not for growth. In fact, I've never seen a calibration cycle change when it was for growth. Usually if you're growing, I want to get the most out of you at the pay rate that you're at. When I'm shortening that calibration cycle, why do companies pick this time of year to lay off people? Why do they do it in the fall? Why do they do it before the holidays? What's that?
I was gonna say bonuses. They want to do
Bonus? Sometimes when you get laid off, you get a portion of your bonus. But it helps you go to the new year clean, and it helps inflate fourth quarter earnings. Yeah, so if you look at the last 6 weeks, the number of companies that have laid off people, this is typically when you do it. If you do it outside of this cycle, there's more serious issues with the business, typically, because they have to do something. And typically they'll time it before a quarter end, so they get the advantage of getting people off the payroll. Yeah. Any questions on this? This is the stuff of management. When you're leading a team, this is what you're going to need to do. So 3, 4, and 5 kids, they earn your attention. These people get it, these people don't. Right? So the story is everybody, when I'm making a beef stew, everybody gets potatoes, beef, broth, carrots, whatever it is. But you got to turn up the heat. If you don't turn up the heat, I've got gazpacho, and I hate cold soup. So you have to show me the training that we invested in. What is it? So when you start working in an organization, how long do you think you have before they form an impression? How long you start a new job, how long before you form an impression? 2 weeks. Does that sound fair?
In my personal experience, I feel like when we hire me, I'm a little shy. I'm not as outgoing as I maybe would probably but first 2 weeks,
Yeah. I would tell you the first 90 days is all about impression management. If somebody asks you to do something, you do it as fast as possible. Over-index on your time, because people want to see, they're going to form impressions off of students. Elite custody, all that impression management. They're going to determine whether they want to invest in you or not in that first 90 days. They want to know if they hired somebody that's high position or not. So first 90 days is always about impression management. Don't be the first to lead. What does that mean? It's important. And what you do from there, like show your bosses solutions, make sure they know it. But that's what most people screw up. When you're working for a corporation, especially a corporation. How many people can build a career by saying no? Early on, if you say no, people listen. Yeah, if there's something that's new, yeah, I'll raise your hand. I want to learn. When you come into an organization, you don't have any experience, you have to make sure you and your ability to learn. Right? Old people like me, when they institute a new computer system, I've seen 5 or 6 of them. I'm tired of it. You want to be the expert on the new systems. Pour your energy into it. Because that's what they're expecting. Right? Make sense? Any questions on that? Yeah, so in the group projects, the other thing, when you ask for a one-word descriptor, it's interesting. When you inherit a dysfunctional team, most of you are using nice words. I'll have people say a-hole, jerk. What's that tell me? Somebody,
Oh, so you really need to get rid of them, I guess.
well, it tells me there's a problem. What's interesting is the same person, somebody says they're an a-hole, somebody else says they're a jerk. Technically, that person's a problem. You don't earn that name lightly. For somebody to write that on a piece of paper and give it to their boss that says, I think this person's a moron. Because you know I'm going to ask you about it. They're screaming for me to talk about this. Right? You'll see it. Yeah, but you don't want to be that person. So think about how you work with each other. How do you build the team? What I love is when I put number 1 or number 2 saying, hey, you know what, can you give me number 5 as a project? Love that. 6 or 7. What do I do if number 2 or number 1 comes to me and says, hey, I'd like to take 6 or 7 as a project? Do I let them? Take my top performer. I'm saying these people are probably close to promotion. Do I want them working with 6 or 7? Do I?
Yes.
Yeah, you say yes, why?
That way the whole team kind of is, there's not many overloads, no slackers.
How long do I let them work with them?
That I wouldn't know, but if I had to give a number, and with 1 3 months,
That's a long time, man.
I don't know.
No, I appreciate you. I was just, yeah,
I would say, they're 2 starters.
okay. How long does it take them to recover if my numbers start to dip? What is it that these people typically need that my star performers are going to be able to fix?
Initiative.
What's that?
Initiative.
Yeah, how do I motivate people? I agree with loopholes. I get rid of the ones who aren't. Yeah, have you ever truly motivated somebody? I mean, the basics is trust. Like, I know I have my back. But if I gotta pry these people out of bed with a crowbar, what's the pep talk? I've probably made a bad hire. I've been deceived at some point, or job's not what they thought it was, right? That's a demotivator. There's things I can do to remember situational leadership, like, hey, what's happening that's putting you here? Is it you don't see the future? Let me show you, if you turn it up over the next 3 months, you can turn this around. But you gotta do something different. So if I take 1 and 2 and have them work with this, I don't let them go for longer than 2 weeks. Because I need to assess, is it a motivation issue? If it's skills, I should be able to coach skills fairly quick. But if it's motivation, if they don't understand their role or the importance of it, my top 2 people should be able to assess that and tell me, yeah, I don't know if they're going to pull out of it. But I don't want to take them for a month to help these people. I should be able to see a difference in a couple weeks if it's coachable. Right? Now, it could be it's just a bad hire, it's a bad match. They're not a bad person, but it's a bad match. Then I go to them and say, hey, you and I both made a mistake. either I didn't do a good job explaining what this was, or you didn't understand it when we explained it. We'll co-own this. But we both agree you're not doing well. Let's pick a date. All right, this is time to be honest. A lot of people get into sales because they like to see the salary they can make, but then they realize they don't like the day-to-day rejection, and it's taxing on them emotionally, and you see them crater. You can do some pep talking, but if they internalize every rejection, you probably didn't hire the right person. And so this is the risk, right? When I'm interviewing somebody, if they don't know themselves, I'm taking a risk. Which is fine. Coming out of school, you have a lot of energy. Sometimes it masks that. But somewhere in the interview, when I've made a mistake in hiring, I want a whole battery of questions. So to make sure that next time I hire somebody, it's like, I want to know how you handle rejection. How do you internalize it? Because at some level, you internalize rejection, right? What's your self-talk? If I asked you in the last 2 weeks, is your self-talk more of a critic or a coach? What would you say? Because you guys are in an environment where you're evaluated now via grade. Though it shouldn't be your self-worth as a human being. But your self-talk, are you critical of yourself or are you coaching yourself? What do you say? Critic or coach? Coach, good. What does that sound like?
Encouraging, but I'm pointing out my mistakes and my weaknesses and trying to improve.
Good. But not everybody, not everybody has that self-talk. Play with that. Because the critic, if you just stay with the critic, it's usually not a good space. Move to the coach faster. I can do better. This is what I need to do different next time. I'm going to play with this. It's the journey. Failure's never final, success is never certain. Play with that. Failure, if I don't hit a goal, doesn't mean I'm a failure. If I change my major in college, doesn't mean I'm a failure. I just realized what I don't want to do. But people around you, your parents, siblings, friends, they can interpret a lot of it as a failure. And then we start to internalize that. Right? Yeah, it'll play out. So, firing somebody for cause, if they're a thief, they're a liar, it's still painful, but it's easy. Because I have a defined reason. The issue is, if I've hired somebody incorrectly, they're just not cut out for it, or if I gotta do a riff. That's where the pain is. So, former life we sold personal care division of our company, great people in it. The company who bought the personal care division didn't need any of the people. Because we were jettisoning it, we didn't have room for any of those people. I had to tell them they were losing their job at the culmination of the acquisition. It was painful because they were good people. Now, hopefully, as a manager, you have a network of people that you can help them find jobs. And I would tell you, if you're a good manager, you do that in those situations. So you should always be networking, and you should always be interviewing. Make sure that you have the best team on the courts. Now, so GE, I don't know if you guys have studied GE, they're famous for what they call rank and yank. So GE, for years, Jack Welch said the program is you always fire the bottom 10%, regardless. So when you do your annual calibration, typically at GE in October, you would know if you're in the bottom 10. And then you had basically 3 months to turn it around to survive. And they fired everybody in February. What do you think that does to the culture? If you fired bottom 10% every year out of calibration, what's it like to work at GE?
I think it would be with the competition between team members.
Yeah, it is a dog-eat-dog culture. Now, interesting, when people leave GE, they tend to do well. So at some point, every year you're cutting some muscle. You're probably cutting good people. I would argue that's why they tend to do well when they go someplace else. Now, when you're in a takeover situation, if you're turning around a company that's not doing well, I would say that probably makes sense for 3 years, so that I turn the right people. But at 3 years in, if I'm still doing that, I'm creating a culture where everybody's biting each other's face. Because when I sit down and do a 360, the game becomes, how do I make somebody else look bad so I don't get cut? Those are ugly discussions. When I do this consulting, you can see it. There's a lot of banks that cut the bottom 10% thing, but they still implement it. It's an ugly place to work. Because people focus more on how they game that system than actually doing a good job. It's just a behavioral issue. And eventually I think it catches you. But at the time, GE was growing leaps and bounds, everybody bought into that mantra, but it's painful. Yeah. So when you do a calibration, you think about the groups that you worked in. And you think about how you come out of college, everybody's been in a group where somebody does nothing. Right? It's not fun. You probably secretly despise the person that didn't do anything but got the grade. Right? I know I did. You know, be the person that's learning, not the person that's coasting. But when you go to the workforce, how does that show up? The people that coast, because it'll still happen. How do you prevent it from happening when you go into the workforce? Your boss comes to you and say, hey, I want you 3 people on this task force. How do you prevent from repeating what you experienced in college or a project? How do you prevent it?
Specific goals, so you kind of give direction.
Yeah. How do you set the goals? Thank you.
I mean, you don't need a big goal. Like, obviously your task force is gonna have the big goal at the end, but you need little directions
Yeah.
in the middle so that you keep them working.
Yeah. So do you assign individuals specific tasks?
I would say yes, because you don't need everyone doing the exact same thing for each subtask.
Yeah.
So you need each person doing something themselves.
Yeah. So typically you would hope you get different functional areas. I need somebody from finance, operations, and sales. So the role, the context should define what I do. So if I say, hey, we need to come up with a new product because we have a product that's about to be obsolete, I'm going to bring somebody from R&D, somebody from finance because I got to make sure whatever we develop we can monetize, somebody from operations, and probably somebody from sales. Is there a market for this? So when you get together, you say, okay, let's stage this. The R&D people are going to say, hey, sales, I need your analysis of what's selling in the marketplace and what are the features and benefits of those products so that I can develop a product. Sales should come back and say, and we need the voice of the customer. So I'm going to take you on an exploratory call with our largest retailers to see what they're seeing, because I don't want to be smoking my own exhaust. Okay, so they're doing that. Finance, as sales finds what's hot in the marketplace, if they say, hey, for the retailer to buy into this new product, I need it to be priced at $29.97, and I need to make sure we're delivering a 42 gross margin delivered. So if R&D product development is doing that, they can't go say, hey, I'm buying a Dyson motor that's going to cost me $170. There's no market for it. So that friction, figure out how you fight, and figure out, let's stage what has to happen for each person to do it. The leader typically emerges by bringing order to that chaos. If you don't get good at that, you won't be successful in an organization. So think about how you hold each other accountable. You set timelines. And what is the consequence if you don't meet the timeline? Because your boss isn't going to care. But when it falls apart, you want to be able to say, hey, here's the timeline we laid out. Joanne or Rick didn't hold up their end. That's why we failed. Otherwise, that whole team gets burned. Yeah. You typically don't do that when you're assigned a group. Right? The first person that speaks is the de facto leader. All they're good at is seizing power, typically. In the real world, you gotta be good at seizing power. But you also have to be good at organizing it. And you have to do it in a way where you don't come off like a jerk. That's the trick. When you get put in an ad hoc team. A lot of companies like McKinsey, they rate all their people on how good they're working in a team. So when that team has to be formed, it's kind of like your Uber rating. They'll say, oh, this person's good to work with. People have worked with them in the past say they're good to work with. If you get a low rating, yeah, then you don't get special projects. It cascades on its own. Think about that. So the other thing, when you're going through college, I don't know why it isn't fostered here. I don't see it. But when you're in a class and you see somebody that's smart or you think somebody's going to be successful, be intentional about staying in touch with them. Harvard, Wharton, Columbia, the quote-unquote Ivy League schools do a really good job of that. I don't know why that doesn't happen here. But I would encourage you to do it. Basically form your own share group so that as you go through your career, you got a group of people to pull from. Make sense? Difficult to do. Social media has robbed you of it. But when I was going through school, that's what we did. So when you hit these challenges, you got a group of people to pull from. If you experience this, tell me what's going on over at Amazon. How did they fire all those people? Yeah, I know I don't want to repeat that. Right? So your boss comes to you and says, let's get a group of 5 people from each functional area. Ask the boss, who do you want to lead it? If it's new product development, should product development own it? Should sales? Who should own it? Don't let it be a jump ball, because that'll create its own friction. Right? If I know product development's leading it, then part of my job is to make sure the person leading it looks good. Because at some point, management's going to ask them, how did this go? And I want them to say, you know what, Max did a great job. He was actually critical to this team. And if you get chose to lead it, that's the type of data you want to collect. After it, whether it's successful or not, you want a correction of errors meeting with your boss. Here's how we can make it better next time. Here's who I can live without. Here's who is a must, because they understand how to work in this environment. Make sense? Yeah, good stuff. Any questions on this? Any questions in the group project? I touched on this. A group of 7, the groups were made purposely large. So hopefully you learned about yourself is what is your behavior when you're in a large group. If you self-select and you slide to here, that's a problem. You can't hide in the real world. They come looking for you. If this is a behavior trait that you have experience in your projects, fix it. Because you're in charge of your own employability. And that's the way you keep your job. You remain employable. So this means you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone. If I got a team of 7, then only 3 can functionally do the work. You need to elbow in, what can I do to be of use here? Whatever it is, you have to do that. You can't say passively by. Because if you work at a company, it's going to be an issue. Play with that. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? There's no dumb questions. Everybody's mute. Does it make sense? Do you want to debate any of the things we just talked about? Good? Okay. So, you, as a boss, at some point you're going to have people come to you with issues. And you're going to get hit with issues that you've never encountered before. And you say, okay, well, how do I make sense of this issue? Right? Who are the experts? Who do I need to talk to? So on the battlefield, you have somebody come in and say, hey, we're being attacked over here. Okay, how big is the attack? You got this whole list of questions. But they basically come down to this management mantra. Tell me what you know, tell me what you don't know, tell me what you think. And then I want you to distinguish between those three. So tell me what you know. I typically say these are the 5 boxes of how I take perspective. This will be on the test. So tell me what you know. How do I determine what is a fact? You've heard people say, just give me the facts. What does that mean? Okay, take emotion out of it. Okay. What is a fact? Yeah, Max. Okay, can you give me an example? Yeah. Okay, and that's a great example. Now, I could say, you said 2 plus 2. If I say 2 and 2, it could be 22 or 4. Right? You correctly said 2 plus 2 is 4. Is there some universe where 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4? Yeah. So sometimes, thank you for saying that, sometimes I'll say, what are the facts, Max? 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay. Then when the plan falls apart, I go back and say, hey, Max, or you said 2 plus 2 was 4. You said, no, I said 2 and 2. You see people equivocate, right? Listen for that stuff. So tell me what you know. These are, we're being attacked. Product launched in the marketplace. Looks like the consumer loves it. It's getting 5-star reviews on Amazon and every place else. And their consumption is going through the roof. Facts. Okay? What don't you know? That's a tough one. When I ask my team, tell me what you don't know, this is where I want to see their curiosity. I don't know what's happening in the consumer's mind that says this is a better product than what we have. Outwardly, it looks like this is what they're advertising, but it could be smoke and mirrors. Antiperspirant deodorant. Do you know what the active ingredient in antiperspirant deodorant is? It's not. It's technically an active ingredient, but it's not what keeps you dry. Aluminum zirconium. The FDA says you can't put any more than 21% aluminum zirconium in an antiperspirant deodorant. So, clever marketer comes out and says, this is clinical strength. And they say it's a 72-hour wetness guarantee. Now, prior to that, there's 24-hour. And somebody took it 48 hours. And then somebody says, let's call it clinical strength. Tell people to put it on at night. And voila, you got 72 hours of antiperspirant protection. No difference in the active ingredients. Opinion, marketing. It's good to say, how much marketing am I looking at that isn't true? So it's funny, you sit down with the buyer and say, hey, the FDA limits this active ingredient. When you look at the active ingredients, everybody's maxed out the active ingredient. How do you get to make this claim? Right? But in the consumer's mind, it's like, ooh, clinical strength 72-hour claim looks better than brute antiperspirant deodorant for 8 hours. Because this appears it's going to keep me drier longer. Has anybody went 72 hours without applying deodorant? Maybe if you're camping in a war zone. What do they now? Most people, at least in the US, don't do that. So now I can maybe funky marketing. So what I don't know is how they're making that claim. It sounds bogus, right? Now, if I've got an expert in the category or whatever, I can say, tell me what you think. Because their opinion might be informed. It's more important than somebody else's facts. Who might that be? Whose opinion would I might listen to? Because it's an informed opinion. In the CPG world, if I'm making hair products, mostly bought by women, most guys don't buy curling irons, wouldn't it be important to consider people that actually use it? Their opinion is going to probably matter more than if I'm an engineer in the back room saying, oh, this is the deal, right? Informed opinion is a big deal. But if I just land in the fact box, right, I could make the wrong decision. All I'm looking at is facts. Because facts take time. So analysis, if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I've looked at this. I did an initial analysis. Maybe I looked at trend data by zip code out of my Amazon sales. And I noticed that the East and West Coast are buying this at a rate 10 times more than the mid-US. Now my analysis says that the last time this happened, it was a trend that moved from East to West Coast into Middle America. It took 2 years. Now, as a boss, I love hearing that because somebody did some initial analysis. Does it mean that they've correctly identified a trend? They're using historical data. They're saying the same purchase pattern exists. Therefore, we're probably on the same road. Where does it stop? Where do I say, okay, yeah, I get it. That's what occurred in the past. Doesn't mean that it happens now. So, hunches. If you've got enough experience, if somebody has a hunch that has experience, I might go with that hunch or an instinct to make the decision. Because I'm getting all these perspectives, I've got to make a decision, right? Chicago Fire Department, anybody here work in a fire department? Fire departments are usually divided into two types, those who go in to fight a fire and those who fight the fire from outside. Chicago Fire Department is famous for shooting the fire with water from the outside. So their ranking of the firemen is the most senior person is at the front of the fire hose. Why do they do that? And you tell me the most senior person has the most experience. Why do they do that? Okay, and what else? Thank you. If they have the most experience fighting fires, they know the shape of fires, they know when something bad could happen or is about to happen because they've experienced it. And their instinct usually is better than somebody else's fact or hunches. because their instinct, they're gonna react faster. So if I'm in a situation where I have to react fast, I may rely more on the most senior person's instinct, and I have to make a snap judgment, right? So as you're collecting perspective, and I would argue in business, everybody is paid for perspective, especially when it comes to decision-making time. That's true. You're paid for a perspective. As young people, you're gonna have a better perspective of social media than I do. You're gonna be able to inform me. Oh, here's how they do this, here's how they do TikTok, whatever it is. I need to listen to that. And I'll weigh that heavier than somebody that's my age that hasn't really played with it or didn't grow up with it. Right, so if I'm gonna make a snap judgment, I'm gonna rely on your judgment before I rely on somebody else that doesn't have that organic experience. So it's good to know in your team who owns which box, because every situation is different. When they bring a problem forward or an issue, ask the 3 questions. What do you know? What do you think? What don't you know? Pay attention to what you don't know, because it will inform you of the other 2. Spend time with that. That's how you verify perspective. Did everybody get the email? I had to change the syllabus. I was a moron. I left the 24th off. So we'll move the test back 1 week to the 14th. Does that create an issue for anybody? Yeah. Okay. Do me a favor, shoot me an email and we'll figure out when you do that. Yeah. Okay. So shoot me an email. Okay, shoot me an email. So 3 emails, 4? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Any questions over anything we discussed? Yeah.
What was the name of the 5 thoughts?
How you take perspective. Yeah. Perspective taking. Yeah. Any questions? Good. Okay, so next week I hope to have a guest speaker, and then we'll go through basic business acumen, which is typically what people miss when you put together cash, margin, velocity, all the stuff that you would use to evaluate a business. It's important that you know how to do it to evaluate your own business, but you got to